Your favorite rest of season rankings show is back. Faraz, Upper Hand Fantasy. You can find all of his work down in the description below, either on Instagram or his rest of season rankings are on upperhandfantasy.com. Today, Faraz, we have a whole bunch of rookies, a whole bunch of veteran wide receivers to discuss as well, since they're hitting their peaks at this moment of the season. Maybe some underperforming players that maybe we should hold out hope on. I know to me, I always get these questions of, well, at this point in the season, how much do you factor in what they've done so far versus rest of the season schedule? And Faraz, I tried to do some of that today, and my brain is in a bit of a blender here.
It's not easy. It's not easy because at this point of the season, we have a kind of a barometer of trust for all of these players. Do I trust them? Do I not trust them? But then sometimes some of these players, you look at their fantasy playoff schedule and you're like, ooh, maybe I should hold out hope. So I get it. Yeah. So I think this show, like we have a few names here that might fit that mark. So I think we'll go over that, try to make sense of a little bit of it at least.
We know we're in week 11, and that is typically the time for a whole bunch of rookies to make their giant debuts because, as we know, from week 10 on, a lot of the fantasy season is defined by rookie performances. And this year it's a bunch of running backs. So Faraz, let's first dive into it. Expert consensus rankings have RJ Harvey as running back 25 the rest of the season. Where do you have him right now?
I have him at RB20. I have him at RB20. Now, we don't know if J.K. Dobbins is going on IR, right? Like
it certainly sounds like it. There's a bunch of smoke in that direction at this moment.
That's what it seems like. And I'm going to make that assumption here. And I'm kind of like, even RB20 for me, I feel like is a little conservative, to be honest with you. I really do. And I'm kind of hedging a little bit here. But, I mean, look at what he's done so far. He leads all running backs in fantasy points per touch. Okay, that's the one that's been going around. But here, check this out, man. Here are the leaders in fantasy points per snap. Okay, Jahmyr Gibbs is number 1. I'll skip number 2. You might know why. Jonathan Taylor is number 3. James Cook is number 4. Devon Achane is 5. Josh Jacobs is 6. Christian McCaffrey is 7. Rico Dowdle's 8. Okay, you know who's number 2? RJ Harvey. Okay, so there's so much upside here that me ranking him at RB20 is hedging. And, you know, over the next 4 games without J.K. Dobbins, potentially, we're looking at somebody in a Sean Payton system. I know a lot of people are scared of the fact that, like, he likes to use multiple running backs, Tyler Bidet and, you know, maybe some Julian McLaughlin. I totally get that. But he drafted RJ Harvey. He's a fan of his. And you couldn't deny what J.K. Dobbins was doing with his opportunities. Now there's nobody in the way for RJ Harvey to just absolutely go off over the next few games.
So J.K. Dobbins was getting around 15 carries per game, doing absolutely nothing in the receiving department. As much as I like RJ Harvey, I can also point out that some of the stats that you just mentioned were a bit skewed because he's only averaging about 7.5 touches per contest. But look, even if we just get 10 of the carries from J.K. Dobbins, that brings RJ Harvey to about 17 touches here. This Broncos offensive line is very good. To me, RJ Harvey has cooled some of the concerns that you people out there had that he bounces every single run. He's had some of the, most explosive runs of his season straight up the middle through the heart of the defense and then making second and third level defenders miss. He carried the load back in college on top of this. And we've already seen if he just gets some of the gimmies, just some of the mindless carries on top of this for us, Sean Payton is already designed for a head coach who loves to design some cool ass plays for RJ Harvey to have touchdowns inside the 10, inside the red zone on third down conversions. When I look at the rest of the season, he has some really difficult matchups. Kansas City and Green Bay in 2 of the next 5 weeks. Then you also have like the Washington Commanders and the Las Vegas Raiders and the bye week in the other 3. So we might have to pick our spots here in terms of massive ceiling weeks, but I would be stunned just based on the rest of the roster if he doesn't exit with around 13, 14, 15, heck, even 17 touches per contest. And with that, I would place him, right after DeAndre Swift in rankings and ahead of the other split backfields, because I don't really see this one being as split of a backfield as it has in the past as my running back 20.
Give me 65% of snaps. I think that's kind of on the high end potentially, but I can totally see that being a scenario where he ends up going off, right? 15 plus touches, great offensive line you mentioned, goal line role, right? That's not something that he's had. Obviously, that was the J.K. Dobbins role. He's going to get that. And he already has 3 RB1 finishes on the year. And you mentioned the college stuff, right? Like, we have to remind people, 96th percentile missed tackle rate in the Power 5, 88th percentile after contact rate, 98th percentile breakaway run rate. We've seen some of that already. 88th percentile yards per route run. This is like you're describing the Sean Payton running back.
Totally.
Basically. So, wheels up.
What I loved in college too is that he forced these edge defenders or linebackers or safeties, once they're, at the point of attack with him, to attack his edges, right? And almost reach. And on that reach, he would, make a move diagonally, laterally, and make you whiff, or he breaks that arm tackle constantly. So I'm really excited to see what happens here for RJ Harvey. Again, running back 25 in consensus rankings. They have him after the likes of Dave Montgomery, Omarion Hampton, Ken Walker. Just question marks, I think, galore for a few of those names brought up. Okay, so we have two more rookie running backs to hit on. The next one is Woody Marks. Again, we're both going to be higher than consensus here, who expert rankings have him as running back 28 rest of season. I'm at running back 22. Where are you at for Woody Marks the rest of the way?
Right there, RB23.
Nice.
So very similar. We've seen him have a huge snap share in a few games this year, but this was the first game where he started. He continued to play throughout, early in the game this time, right? Without it being a negative game script. He was a negative game script guy, right? Like, you can kind of predict, okay, this could potentially be a Nick Chubb game. This could be a Woody Marks game. But last week, in the beginning of the game, that's usually Nick Chubb's role. Now it's looking like a guy who's like any type of game script type of player. And this kind of role, especially if he takes most of the passing down work from, Dario Ogunbowale, like, this is going to be a very valuable role. And I think RB23, if this role sticks, and that's really like the big if here, because there's only one game sample size, I think that's also conservative. And, I can't lie, like, I wasn't the biggest Woody Marks guy coming out. I thought he profiled more as a receiver than as a runner out of the backfield. I still somewhat believe that to be true. I mean, he is like the least elusive running back in terms of missed tackle rate this season. But listen, opportunity is the name of the game, and it looks like he's getting it right now.
I think that missed forced tackle rate is going to skyrocket up, because I see someone who does have wiggle at the first and second level once he gets to linebackers and safeties, and just his cuts to me are explosive. Look, I've already talked about Woody Marks 3 times this week, so this will be the 4th. So I'll keep it short. I know we've been teased in the past of like a half and it goes to Woody Marks. And so then we carry that over to the next game and it's like, oh, this is going to be a Woody Marks week. This is different. He started the game when it was 0-0. He started the next 7 series, when they were down 10 points, 17 points, even in comeback mode. The final drive, when they had to have it, it was a 3rd and 3 design touch for Woody Marks to get to the edge, and he got the freaking ball. Also, what we've gotten since that game here from D'Amico Ryans, quote, there are no more rookies on this team. Woody, let's go. We got to continue to feed him more. And he then talked about Jaden Higgins. He talked about Jaylen Waddle, all these guys. So look, the roster is quite kind and the schedule is quite kind for Woody Marks. He's got Tennessee this week, then Buffalo, then Arizona. It sucks he has the Rams on the schedule as well. But man, Woody Marks, to me, I think the Texans realized in the first 7-8 weeks of the season, oh, we like our veterans. We're going to play these guys. They know where to be on the football. Now it's, our offense was struggling, maybe because we were so reliant on those older, slower veterans. And now we get some juice onto the team. And so while CJ Stroud might miss this week, I still think that's going to mean Woody Marks, Jaden Higgins, and Jaylen Waddle all get more playing time moving forward.
I would hope so. I really don't want to see more of Xavier Hutchinson, man. I really don't. And Christian Kirk too. Jaylen Waddle is just an explosive player, and if he's playing out of the slot, that's who you want to see. Running there. I don't want to see those other guys anymore. I really don't.
So again, consensus rankings have him after like J.K. Dobbins, which I'm assuming that just hasn't been updated at this point, and even Alvin Kamara. I know Alvin Kamara had a nice week 10. Alvin Kamara really hasn't had a nice week before week 10. So I would easily take Woody Marks ahead of Alvin Kamara rest of season. Okay, the big talking point here is TreVeyon Henderson. Consensus expert rankings have him as running back 20 rest of season. I have him as running back 21 rest of season. He's been the running back 20 and then running back 4 over the past 2 weeks after taking, the lion's share of the work here of the Patriots backfield. Faraz, where are you at for the rest of the year?
I'm a little lower. Than consensus here. RB24. RB24 here for me. The Patriots in week 10, this past week, 4.63 yards before contact per attempt. That was second only behind the Colts last week. Every other week, weeks 1 through 9, 1.29 yards before contact per attempt. That was 28th among all teams. And we've seen once he has space, he is absolutely, it's lights out, right? Like he's gone.
Yep.
He had a great play when he was running up the middle and then caught the edge and then was able to get that touchdown. That was an amazing play. But Ramondre Stevenson is going to come back. And I just believe that based on what we've seen with TreVeyon Henderson so far this year, I don't think, and you know, I'm one of those guys, like maybe you can't put the lightning back in the bottle, but this is such a stubborn coaching staff when it comes to playing Ramondre. It didn't matter that he fumbled several times early in the year. Henderson hopefully will get more looks because of these games. He's looking really good. They just need to sprinkle him in more than they were. Maybe just give him more touches. I just don't think it's going to happen. And I get it because if you look at the numbers here, like 35 running backs with 80 plus carries this season, he ranks dead last in yards after contact per attempt. You know, Ramondre is not amazing, but he's at 24. He also ranks 31st among those 35 running backs in missed tackles forced per attempt. Believe it or not, Ramondre is actually at 6th. I haven't seen that with my eyes personally, but that's what the number says. And obviously, you know, the explosive run rate is there. You know, he had those 2 big runs last week. So I get it. I understand wanting to have Ramondre in there, but like I'm a firm believer that they need to mix in Henderson more than they've been. So that's why I'm just not overly bullish on Henderson rest of season.
So love the stats that you brought up at the top in terms of yards before contact. In my brain, I just try to process, okay, why was that the case? And to me, it's because the Patriots opened the season running into walls, right? Their tackle to tackle blocking and even tackle to tight end blocking has been miserable this year. And no one's been effective at it. You know, that's Ramondre, that's Antonio Gibson, that's TreVeyon Henderson, because there just aren't lanes. And guess what? If there were more lanes, then almost that untouched run straight up the middle with, again, just exploding out of the cannon, that would have happened more often. And maybe it does in the future. But I think what Josh McDaniels has realized is, okay, we can't run from tackle to tight end. We have to get to the edge. TreVeyon Henderson, some might say, like Hayden, is a bit cautious from tackle to tight end, and he's at his best on the edge. So it's almost to me like his strengths line up with where the Patriots can have the most success running the football. But in the back of my head, I have that same whisper that you do of, well, when Ramondre comes back, he's going to have at least some of a role here. And it might be a much bigger role and be a like thorn in our side. Like TreVeyon got 3 carries inside of the 10-yard line last week. One was great. One got them down to the 1-yard line. And then the next 2 were both inside runs. And, one was inside, one was outside. But both times the offensive line just got totally blown up and they were blown blocks. I also look at the rest of the season schedule. Faraz, TreVeyon Henderson might have, and the Patriots running backs might have the easiest running back schedule rest of season. It's the Jets tonight, then the Bengals, then the Giants, then the bye, then Buffalo and the Jets again in 2 of the final 3 weeks. So I don't think that TreVeyon is going to get the same amount of touches when Ramondre Stevenson comes back as like RG Harvey or Woody Marks are going to. But at the same time, I think TreVeyon Henderson is an explosive player, and it only takes like 1 or 2 touches in order to like have the same amount of stats as the other 2 guys. But I do worry that he's just going to get usurped in the short yardage stuff like he's owned the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's a concern, but also the passing snaps too. Like these past 2 weeks, around 70% route participation, which is like elite, right? That's what you want to see, and that's how you're going to get targets. But before that, when Ramondre was playing, like he was down at like 20% at times, 30%, like barely getting targets. And that's kind of the role that we forced. Like we thought, okay, maybe he can get like a Deion Lewis, type of, James White type of role, maybe in the receiving game. I'm not really sure where that came from necessarily, but that is definitely not the case, right? So what kind of role is he going to have? What kind of standalone value? What kind of real role are we going to be able to say, okay, that is his role? Is it just a complimentary role? That's kind of what I'm worried about.
Now, I think a big performance tonight could go a long way in one direction or the other. Like if he posts another 2+ gains of 50 yards, then can you really make him a 40% back moving forward? When the Patriots offense has been amazing this year, but it just looks so much faster when both he and Kyle Williams were on the field. this
So
past
true.
week. Okay, so just to recap these rookie running backs that now are more in our lives than ever before. You have it, RJ Harvey, Woody Marks, and then TreVeyon Henderson. I have it, RJ Harvey, TreVeyon Henderson, and then Woody Marks rest of season. Fair?
Fair.
Okay. Let's talk about a guy who might be returning to the field in the near future. That is Bucky Irving. We've gotten some, would you call it pixelated photos for us over the past couple days?
Was it him? Was it even him? I don't know. No,
it's like a Melania Trump thing of like, this is the clone. This is the person that they are putting in their absence. Anyways, Bucky Irving. He's missed with a foot issue and also a shoulder issue. We've seen him in a walkthrough yesterday, and I kind of think today was a walkthrough on top of it because they were all in sweatpants, the players. So I don't know how confident I am in him playing week 11, but at the very least, getting back into practice would put him in the fold potentially in week 12, despite us having, no updates on what this injury forecast is. With all that said, expert consensus rankings have Bucky Irving as running back 16 rest of way. What is your optimistic level here of Bucky Irving, and where do you rank him?
I have him at RB 13, and I just moved him up. He was like really low in my rankings because I just had no idea. Like none of us did, right? But he's back. He's back at practice. I did like a little dance yesterday. Like when he came back to practice, I was just because I have him on a lot of teams, man. You know what I mean? Dynasty, redraft, all of it, and and we think he's back at practice. Was there? Did you see a picture today? Like I don't believe it until there was a picture. Okay, great. So, okay, good. I'm glad. So he is back. He has been confirmed. But you look at the first 4 games: RB 15, RB 11, RB 16, RB 7. So I think RB 13 is a decent spot here. They just really need him back. They just need him to get cleared for contact. Bowles basically said that he needs to get hit. And, they're not really in pads this week is what he said. Because, teams kind of like need to pick and choose their spots for when they, wear pads in practice for the entire season. This week is just not one of those weeks for them. And which is not the week that you would want that to happen. But I was really worried. I'm just glad he's back. You look at the playoff schedule, man. Like looking at what I have here, 4th best fantasy playoff schedule. You have Atlanta, Carolina, and Miami, weeks 15 to 17. That could be very, very promising. So despite the fact that Bucky might have killed your season, if you're somehow in the thick of it, and if you can make the playoffs, and he'll be back soon, hopefully next week. If not, I'm guessing not this week, but if he can come back next week, make a little bit of a run for you, he can help you win a championship.
So I have him as running back 17, and maybe that's a bit of a pessimistic outlook. I just feel like looking at, running back 1 through running back 16, which to me is Jonathan Taylor through DeAndre Swift. I just feel really comfortable with the roles that we know those players have and really the offensive infrastructure that they're in. I do have Bucky ahead of someone like Quinshon Judkins, for example, because of, what the Browns offense just totally limits him. Even ahead of Jaylen Warren, because Jaylen Warren's owned the season for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but that is given us a running back 20-ish outcome so far. And then all the rookies we just discussed. The thing with me, and I totally hear you in the first 3 games of this season, he played over 70% of snaps in those games. And that's very different than what we saw for the vast majority of last year when he was around a 50-55% snap player. I just kind of wonder if they're going to go back to that versus what we got in the opening 3 games just because of these dual injuries that he's fighting. Like, doesn't it make sense for a smaller guy who's been out for weeks and weeks and months at this point to not inherit, the 70% workload once again? And as we've seen, he can make really good on the 50 to 55% snaps and touches and all that type of stuff. I also think if the injuries diminish the type of player that we saw with Bucky Irving. So I am not out on him for sure. I am closer to consensus though than you are.
Yeah, no, I get that. As long as the foot injury is good to go, that's really where he makes his money, man. Like making guys miss, opposed to the power. I mean, he was a very good yards after contact player in college as well. And last year he was great too. But no, I hear you, man. Those are very, very valid concerns. Like I could see a situation where Rachaad White ends up taking a lot of the passing down work like he did last year. And I think they were just a lot more comfortable with Bucky, you know, in pass protection and that sort of thing. You know, Rachaad White's a very good pass protector, but he was still able to usurp him in that role. So happy to see it, you know, in those first 4 games. And listen, if it comes down to the fact that, you know, Rachaad White's on the field a little bit more, like I'll take it at this point, just because like I want him back, and a lot of us want him back in our lineups. And I think, like you said, 55% of snaps, like I think he could do good on that as long as he maintains that goal line role.
Okay, before we go anywhere else, if you want to support us, the best way to doing that is to support Underdog. Use promo code The Show. Click the link in the description down below. We're in over 40 states at this point. You can play on drafts, you can do pick 'em, and even 20 states, prediction markets out there where you can do sides and totals and everything of the sort. That's you, Florida, Texas, California, Georgia, Oregon, Virginia, South Carolina. Beautiful, beautiful states. So if you play $5 the first time, I'll throw $100 in bonus cash in your direction if you click the link in the description down below or use promo code The Show. Go and play on the Dog app this weekend. All right. One more running back before we get to the wide receivers, and then a couple of trade questions to end this thing. Saquon Barkley. He's been the running back 13 in points per game on the season. Faraz, where do you rank Saquon Barkley rest of season? Will it get better? Will it get worse? Or will it stay the same?
I think it stays somewhat the same, man. RB 14 on the year. That's where I have him. Doesn't feel
icky.
Like RB when you say RB 13 on the year. Yeah, when you say RB 13 on the year, I'm like, oh, like I guess he was better than what I thought, you know. But it hasn't been amazing, you know. He's just not a difference maker. I think we talked about this before on the previous show. Like we drafted him to be that difference maker. He was clearly a huge difference maker last year. RJ Harvey, like I mentioned before, like RJ Harvey has the same number of RB1 finishes as Saquon Barkley this year. And, you know, you're looking at what we talked about all year long on a run first offense in Philly, you know, you'd think Saquon would be going nuts, but he's just not. He's not doing much after contact. He's not making guys miss. He's averaging under 4 yards a carry. You know, he does have 8 defenders in the box against him on 30% of his runs, which is a lot. His offensive line isn't giving him that much to work with. It's just simply not going great. So I can't have him as a RB1 rest of season. I think it's really name value that is why consensus has him so high. You know, you just have to keep him in your lineup, obviously. Like he's still high up, but guys like Chase Brown for me, I have him over Saquon Barkley. Like Rico Dowdle, Derrick Henry, even Bucky Irving. Like when he comes back, like if he comes back next week, I'm taking Bucky Irving over Saquon Barkley. Like these guys are just presenting a little bit of higher ceilings for me and a little bit more of you know, league winning outcomes, I would say.
He has failed to gain yardage on 26% of his attempts this season. That's only ahead of Ashton Genty. Like, jeez. If that doesn't put into perspective just how bad the run blocking has been for the Philadelphia Eagles, when the only one that is worse is Ashton Genty's run blocking, I mean, nothing else will. That's terrible. I was in your camp with this. I was in your mindset for this. And then for us, I looked at the rest of the season schedule. Boy, is it soft. It's the Dallas Cowboys in week 12. The Chicago Bears in week 13, the Rams in week 15, the Commanders in week 16, and the Bills in week 17. So the Rams one is tough. The rest, we can pick all of that apart. Now, again, is the offensive line good enough to pick that apart? The only team that they've been able to do that for so far this season is the Giants. He has 8 yards per carry against the Giants and 3 yards per carry versus everyone else. I, think that there's a case to be made that the Philadelphia Eagles should be a pass-first unit moving forward. They have been in a couple games this year, but really they haven't pulled that lever in multiple contests in a row. And I still believe that their best football is still ahead of them, and their best football is Saquon Barkley getting back to 90, 85% of what he was last year. And so to me, a lot of times in football with wins and losses, with stats and with fantasy points, a lot of it can be about the opponents that you faced. And the opponents that he faces in this final stretch of games is about the easiest he's going to have all season long. And so that's why I'm much closer to consensus, and I have him as running back 9 rest of the season. I don't feel great about it because it hasn't changed through 10 weeks, but I just think it will from weeks 12 through week 17.
Yeah, and if you take a look at my weekly rankings, in the future against these opponents, like he's going to be high, right? So
Right.
I totally get that. Now you look at some of the easy matchups that he's had, like in the Giants at home, absolutely went off, right? In New York, 12 for 58. Obviously, Giants went up in that game unexpectedly. They're like, oh, like Giants are good now with Jackson Dart. Saquon, 18. He went for 18 carries for 60 yards against the Cowboys right early on in the year. We didn't realize how bad the Cowboys defense was,
right,
but they were bad. And I hope he goes off in the playoffs, man. 7th best playoff schedule is what I have here. So one can only hope that things will get better, but like that's really what it is. It's just a lot of hope at this point that things will get better. And the Eagles are one of those teams that obviously pick it up when it matters. And if it's going to matter later on in the season, that's who you want on your team. But it's tough, man. It's tough to really project. This is one of the guys we talked about. We alluded to early on in the show, where what is the level of trust with Saquon Barkley right now? But now you look at this rest of the season schedule. It's like, how can you not have faith in him, his team, and that schedule? So I get it.
By the way, if you want to support Faraz, the best way of doing that is on Instagram, Upper Hand Fantasy, obviously upperhandfantasy.com as well. We got one more show after this next week, and then we ride off in the sunset and be like proud parents to all of your fantasy football playoff contenders and championship victories after that. All right, let's flip on over to the wide receivers here. Jaylen Waddle, all right, wide receiver 13 in points per game. It's pretty amazing because everything around the Dolphins has been miserable this season, from the quarterback to the fired GM to the head coach getting questioned every single week. And I think a lot of people have at the forefront of their mind that Cleveland Browns contest where it was terrible. They couldn't move the football at all. But again, despite all of that, we know Devon Achane's been the running back 3 in points per game this year. Jaylen Waddle has been the wide receiver 13 in points per game. So with all of that in mind, where are you at with Jaylen Waddle rest of season at a very loaded position right now?
Hey, listen, we talked about this right when Tyreek Hill got hurt, before Jaylen Waddle played any game without Tyreek Hill. And I said he was going to be a wide receiver 1 rest of season. And he's my wide receiver 11 right now.
Yep.
Rest of season. And I feel like I've been evangelizing him every single week since that point. And obviously now it's somewhat consensus, but I hope you guys bought when you could, by the way. But besides the messy weather game in Cleveland in week 7, he has been nothing but awesome, dude. Insanely consistent too. Wide receiver 8 finish, wide receiver 18, wide receiver 5, wide receiver 25. By the way, wide receiver 25 finish, that was 6 for 82 on 9 targets. Okay. Wide receiver 13 last week. And on top of that, cherry on top, he has one of the best schedules the rest of the way. 4th best rest of season schedule for wide receivers, 6th best playoff schedule. And we know that Mike McDaniel is going to be the coach the rest of the way. They just beat Buffalo, right? We're cooking with Waddle moving forward, man. If you have Waddle on your team, it's like, he's a player that you drafted who you can now set and forget as a wide receiver 1 rest of the way.
Like you said, the schedule: Commanders, bye week, Saints, Jets, Steelers, Cincinnati. That's glorious, because this Dolphins team, if you're a bad defense or even an average defense, they take advantage of you. That is the name of the game and has always been with Mike McDaniel and Tua. It's just, the more difficult opponents is where everything struggles. Now, on the road for the Jets in week 14, we'll see what the weather is. On the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 15, we'll see what the weather is, and we'll adjust to all of that. But the stats have been amazing, as you alluded to. Since Tyreek Hill went down with an injury, he is 3rd among wide receivers in receiving yards and also has 3 touchdowns. He has at least 1 catch of 30-plus yards in 4 of the past 6 games. So I'm right next to you. Expert consensus rankings have him as wide receiver 14 rest of way. I'm wide receiver 12. And, Mike McDaniel maybe breathed a bit of life and vigor into this Dolphins team rest of the way. And I don't think he'll turn to Zach Wilson or Quinn Ewers. And I think he knows that just from a watchable standpoint and respect on his name standpoint, he'll play Tua. And that just means Waddle's going to get the football.
Wherever he goes next, he is fighting for that job right now, right? Like this offense, he wants this offense to be the best that it can be for his next job. And, based on how he performs over these next few games, like that could affect where he lands and how much money he gets. So it's going to affect a lot, for him in particular. So, we just got to ride this offense. And that's what we wanted to see. As long as Mike McDaniel, didn't get fired or anything like that, Devon Achane's going to be fine and Jaylen Waddle's going to be fine.
One of the best calls this channel had all season long was prior to last week, ranking Alec Pierce incredibly high. But Faraz, you know what happens once someone like Alec Pierce, who's floating in, wide receiver 4-ish territory in people's minds, then goes off and has an awesome week, then they skyrocketed him up rankings. And then what is his outlook rest of season? So he's been the wide receiver 33 in points per game on the year. Expert consensus rankings haven't updated enough and have him as wide receiver 35 right now, rest of season. Where are you at right now? What's your ranking?
I have him as wide receiver 28 rest of the way. So I'm definitely higher than consensus. And I didn't watch your show last week, but I will say that I was also very high on Alec Pierce. And, if you look at the numbers, like just on, surface level, you look at Atlanta's matchup and you were like, this is an extremely tough matchup, right? They were 5th best DVOA against the pass. They were giving up nothing on the perimeter. They were giving up the 3rd fewest receptions, the 3rd fewest receiving yards to wide receivers. But the reason why that, probably you guys too were continuing to recommend Alec Pierce, even in the matchup, because he has been absolutely cooking against single high coverage. And Atlanta ran single high at an insane 70% rate coming into the game, and he smashed. And now going into his bye, Puka Nacua is 1st in yards per route run against single high coverage, followed by George Pickens. JSN's 3rd, and Alec Pierce is 4th. So going into the game, he was only behind Puka and Pickens. So just monitor that, by the way, because the splits between single high and two high for Alec Pierce is very significant. 3.69 yards per route run against single high going into last week versus 1.22 against two high. That's pretty significant. Target rates also very different. 30% target per route run rate against single high, only 13% against two high. And we also have to keep in mind that they have other target earners on this team, right? They have Michael Pittman, right? They have Tyler Warren. Josh Downs is also against two high. He's also a target earner. So we have to keep that in mind. You look at the rest of the season schedule, like, you have some tough matchups here and a couple of teams who run a majority two high safety coverage. But, at least when you look at down to week 17, week 16, you have Jacksonville twice, which is good. You have San Francisco as well, who's a primarily single high team. So, I think Alec Pierce is going to be fine. Rest of the way, he might have some down weeks, but again, like we always say, just embrace the volatility and keep him in your lineup.
Like you said, in 3 of the next 5 weeks, well, one they have their bye, but it's also Kansas City, Houston, and Seattle secondaries. He's really only faced one defense to the caliber of those. And like you said, the coverage aspects are different, how they, run single high or shells and everything of that sort. But that was Denver back in week 2, and he was the wide receiver 44 at that point. So look, wide receiver 15 and 14 in points per game over the last 2 weeks. I think Alec Pierce, players improve as individuals. I think he has done that. And also they improve when situations improve. And that has happened here for him at the same time. He is a ball winner on the outside. And then to me, he has also just been so much better on in breakers, on out breakers. And they have plenty of players who can make plays on this team. But to me, I just look at every wide receiver, I don't know, after wide receiver 20, it's like the Chris Olave, Zay Flowers, and Michael Pittman category. And it just gets really dicey to me. Like I'll throw A.J. Brown in that, Marvin Harrison Jr., Stephon Diggs, Teddy McMillan. I'm going to rank Alec Pierce as wide receiver 25. And I have him above Cortland Sutton. I have him above DK Metcalf. I have him above some other names like Xavier Worthy, Khalil Shakir, Wan'Dale Robinson. These are just where expert consensus rankings, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston have above Alec Pierce at this point, because I believe in this offense. I believe his role and the targets that he gets are just more valuable than the targets that some of these other players get at the same time. So yeah, there's going to be some valleys. Guess what? There's also going to be valleys for guys who are wide receiver 9 rest of season too. That's just where we are at with this position at the moment.
Yeah. And 25% target share over the last 4 games. That's tied with Michael Pittman. And, like he's getting more targets now and he could have a better rest of season outlook. Like he could have, he's improved as a player, right? He's not just running these deep routes. Now he's using his speed and the fact that defenses know that he can get open downfield as a reason why, like, they're just kind of overplaying that now. He's like stopping and like hitches and things like that. So like things are looking bright in that respect too. Also, he scored only 1 touchdown this year, this past week. Like those are going to be coming pretty soon. So I'm excited to see that. Like we could see a little bit of a regression, on the positive side here.
All right, people. My wife and I just moved into a new home. You know the drill. You get inspections, you get estimates, things to fix, the plumbing, the HVAC, the electrical, the roof, all that type of stuff. If you are going through a similar thing right now, I implore you to add life insurance onto that list. First of all, it's a lot easier to obtain and it's far, far less expensive. And I'll point you in the direction of Ethos, where you can get up to $3 million in coverage. And some policies are as low as $2 a day that are billed monthly. The reason why it's easy is that it is not complicated and it is 100% online. There is no medical exam required and you can only answer a few questions. And that's all that you need. You get a quote in as little as 10 minutes. When I signed up for life insurance, someone came to my door at 7:30 in the morning, sat in the kitchen around the dining table with them for an hour and a half. That was not with Ethos. So again, protect your family with life insurance from Ethos. It is much, much simpler. Get your free quote at ethos.com/the show. That is ethos.com/the show. You never think about life insurance. Hopefully this forces you to do that now. Okay, let's close out this player-by-player conversation with Jameson Williams and his rest of season outlook, because in the last 4 weeks, he's been the wide receiver 13, wide receiver 14, wide receiver 120, and then wide receiver 3. Okay, on the season overall, he's been the wide receiver 39 in points per game. And this might be one of the bigger conversations that we have, because that almost perfectly encapsulates who JMO is as a player. When you can get the wide receiver 3 and the wide receiver 120 in 2 of 3 performances. Inconsistent usage, potentially inconsistent production. Maybe that has changed, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Where do you have him rest of the season and why?
I'm at an optimistic wide receiver 35 rest of the way. So I think that's, what did you say consensus was again? Wide
receiver 27. So I don't know if you can call yourself on the optimistic side of this one for us.
Oh, wow. Wow. That surprises me a little bit. Now, I guess I just need to see more,
Okay.
I think he's on the verge. And I guess what I meant by that was he's on the verge of shooting up my rankings, but again, maybe I'm just slow to the game, I guess, but similar to Alec Pierce in terms of like a lot better against single high than too high. And the splits are real here too, like 2.49 yards per route run against single high versus only 1.11 against too high. 22% target rate against single high, which is not that high in the first place, but also only 11% against too high. So the past week obviously went off 6 catches for 119 yards and a touchdown, best game of the season. And Washington plays the 9th highest rate of single high coming into the week. His next opponent, Philly, runs a lot more single high than too high, but kind of 50-50. The Giants after that run a lot of single high. The Packers are kind of 50-50. Dallas is kind of 50-50. And like, to be honest, like it really depends on how our new play caller, Dan Campbell, and how he runs the ship moving forward, right? Like, are we going to get a lot more of those, intermediate crossers and things like that to kind of, between the linebackers and safeties? Like, we need to see more of that from Jameson Williams. We saw a lot of that off of play action last year from Ben Johnson. Like, where did that go? John Morton, I don't know if you saw this, man. Like, John Morton a couple weeks ago said that he failed Jameson Williams, and it's really interesting to me that in the first game, without him calling plays, Jameson Williams actually absolutely goes off. So I see a little bit more of a this is more than a correlation to me. So I can totally see this really favoring Jameson the rest of the way. I think Dan Campbell is a really underrated play caller here. Anthony, remember, he took over for Anthony Lynn, several years ago, where Lynn wasn't getting the job done. And if I'm not mistaken, going into last week, the Lions had the second most points per game. And he was just like, this is not enough. Like, we need more. We need more. And he took over, and like they looked flawless on offense last week.
And look, this week might be difficult. They're only projected for 22 points. And in previous weeks, they project for 26, 27, 28. But what you just said about Dan Campbell is why I'm much more optimistic than you. I have him as wide receiver 28 rest of season. And it's like this interesting range where I'll probably put Teddy McMillan and Stephon Diggs ahead of him. But then I'll place JMO ahead of like Debo, QJ, Jordan Addison, because those are all roller coaster types on top of it, you know? And I would just pick the one that's in the best offense of the bunch, which is the Detroit Lions. And it's exactly what you said. Last season, with Ben Johnson calling plays, he was the wide receiver 18 in points per game. And it's because of, you know, the vertical sell that we got and then the outside breakers and throttling down. It's the digs and the daggers in the intermediate section. It's the, most importantly, shallow drags with the wide receivers pushing off coverage and just setting up these massive yards after catch opportunities. And we got all of that in just a singular game. So he has some smash spots coming up against the Giants and the Dallas Cowboys defenses, and also some difficult ones, you know, against Philly, against Green Bay, against the Rams. But I think just overall, this is a good player on a good offense that now a play caller came in and immediately we saw massive returns. In order for, I think, the Lions to continue to score like the second highest rate in the NFL, to me, Jameson Williams is going to have a much better second half of the season than he did first half of the season.
Yeah, I hope so. And some of the guys that you mentioned that, you know, you're ranking above them, like Stephon Diggs, Ted McMillan, guys like that, you know, their higher end range of outcomes is nowhere close to the higher end range of outcomes for Jameson Williams. Like, his high end range is a lot higher than those guys, right? The Ted McMillan, Stephon Diggs, those are guys you're playing for their like safe floors, right? Pretty much, right? But Jameson, like, he's the guy who's going to potentially give you wide receiver 1 weeks. So totally understand being more bullish on him. If I see one more game where he's run one of those shallow crossers and things like that, I'm going to be in. I'm going to be in, and we're going to see a big boost in my rest of season rankings for sure.
All right, we'll close it with 2 trade questions. Thank you all for sending them in. I understand with many of your leagues is last week, you can get in those trades and the offers and everything of the sort. So we appreciate everyone for sending these in all season long, taking a leap, believing in yourself, and putting yourself in front of this entire community and audience. The first one here is from Adam.
League mate's been wanting to take Brock Bowers from me all year. He just offered Cortland Sutton and Nico Collins for Brock Bowers. At this point, with my wide receivers on my team, I think I'm a little weak. I've got Teddy McMillan and Jordan Addison in my starting lineup. Only Xavier Worthy on the bench, and he hasn't panned out so far, with Rashee Rice coming back especially. Hoping you can answer this question and let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye.
So Faraz, in his 3, we can call them healthy games this season, Brock Bowers has been the tight end 2, tight end 1, and then tight end 29. Is he one of these guys that we've seen or haven't seen the best of his season yet, or have we already done so?
I mean, I think that 3 touchdown game was pretty damn good. You know what
pretty
I mean?
damn good.
That's probably the best we've seen. But I that one catch performance, man, like I don't see many more of those the rest of the way. Like, there's no way that we see more of those. Like, and for this trade personally, I was just looking at your roster and I was looking at like which tight end you're going to start if you're going to trade away Brock Bowers, and what are the potential options there, because it can't be Colston Loveland, right? Cole Kmet came back, he took over half of the routes at the position. You mentioned Brenton Strange, Cade Otton are out there. I'd love to pick up Otton and start him over Loveland this week, but that's just a start sit thing. But that's besides the point, and that's assuming Godwin doesn't play. By the way, I don't know what kind of target share he's going to get, but overall, I think I'm keeping Bowers here. I think Nico Collins is the man. I'm a big Nico guy, but I just haven't seen him and CJ Stroud get to a point together this year where he's going to be a serious difference maker in your lineup and give you this like real positional advantage. I think it has more to do with the play design than it does the connection between these quarterback and wide receiver. It's kind of the Saquon Barkley problem, right? Like, you know, the difference maker type of issue. And then with Sutton, you know, you have a Troy Franklin problem here, right? You know, he's taking over target share in Denver right now. And a Bo Nix problem for sure. So I don't want to panic, you know, on Bowers after this really big down week. I'm trying to find another way to upgrade my wide receivers. You know, maybe package up some of these other guys here.
So even when he was completely banged up from weeks 2, weeks 3, and weeks 4, and, you know, then went on to miss 3 more just so he could get back to 100%. Brock Bowers is still averaging 12.4 fantasy points per contest, and that's in half PPR. And so if we compare that to Nico Collins, who, mostly been healthy this season and playing with the quarterback that he's supposed to and everything of the sort, he's all the way down as wide receiver 18 and 11.7 fantasy points per contest. So, I think comparing tight end points to wide receiver points can be difficult because obviously then you have the tight end bump after the top 5, anywhere from tight end 7 to tight end 17. It changes on a weekly basis. My only downside here with Brock Bowers, Faraz, is the rest of season schedule. You could argue it's the most difficult one left to go. And we've already seen this Raiders team be terrible, even with an easier setup. I mean, it's Cleveland, then you have the Chargers with Derwin James to lock up tight ends. Then you have Denver, Philadelphia, and Houston. Whew, that's a lot of good teams. And like the one catch performance is so bad from Chip Kelly, who has so much experience calling plays, and so bad from Geno Smith, who has so much experience throwing in negative situations. To only get your best player one catch is amazing stuff. I would still keep Bowers here, but I do understand also that he's staring at, Jordan Addison and Terry McMillan the rest of the way, because it's not like those wide receiver spots are in platforms and environments to have big weeks on top of it too.
I'm looking at my rest of season rankings here for strength of schedule, and it is in fact the worst.
Yep.
Mathematically, it is the worst schedule for tight ends. Not only rest of season, but also playoffs as well. So
yeah,
your point, it remains, but at the end of the day, like you mentioned with Nico Collins, like he's averaging more fantasy points even with the injury. Right. And he gets, tight end, obviously, like he's going to give you a little bit of a positional advantage where Nico's not. So overall, I don't think you could do this trade.
Yeah, this is a tough one. And I think it would be easier to make this trade because of how he just finished this past game as the tight end 29. Just again, think of the tight end 1 performance the week before and middle ground that a little bit. Last question. This is from Khakis Jack.
What's up, Faraz and Josh? Big fan of the show. So I'm in a 12-team PPR league. I was offered Jaylen Waddle and Tez Johnson for my Deebo Samuel and TreVeyon Henderson. I don't really want to give up TreVeyon because of his recent breakout, but I am kind of considering it because when Ramondre comes back, I'm not sure what the workload's going to look like, and fear that maybe he'll be demoted to being an RB3 again. Interested to hear your guys' thoughts, and thanks.
Faraz, 2 names we've already talked about. Which side are you on here?
I think people can take that guess right here, right? Because like I talked really good about one and not so great about the other. I think I'm doing this 1,000% for sure. I'm getting Waddle. Not looking back. There were already reports saying that Ramondre is going to get his job back right when he returns. So I don't think Henderson's going to be the workhorse when Ramondre's healthy. You're getting a wide receiver 1 in Waddle for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier in the show. So yeah, I'm going to keep it short and sweet on this one, man. I'm definitely doing this deal.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, again, despite how rocky it's been for the Dolphins, Waddle and Achane have been incredibly consistent this season. I'm just looking at a starting lineup. That would mean he has a Bengals quarterback, then Devon Achane, and then he would have to start David Montgomery there as his second running back. Then at wide receiver, you're pairing Jaylen Waddle with Jackson Smith and Jigba. And then your flex spot can be any one of Deebo Samuel to Brian Thomas Jr., to Isaiah Pacheco, and even Ricky Pearsall if he potentially comes back. So yeah, I think Jaylen Warren is, from start to finish the season, the most consistent threat, the most consistent fantasy asset here. But Faraz, I think there is a chance, a non-zero chance, that TreVeyon Henderson does just simply outscore him the rest of the way. But that would, mean that Josh McDaniels buys into his rookies and plays him much, much more than he was in the past when Ramondre Stevenson does come back from this toe issue.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's tough. And it's a lot of wish casting here, right? Let's see what he does tonight, because it's going to go a long way to what his role is going to be rest of season. Because if he ends up going off for another 100 rushing yards tonight and he comes back next week, Ramondre Stevenson still, maybe that toe is lingering a little bit more. He might have some more opportunities, Yeah. I mean, you never know. Ramondre might not be 100% going into week 12. So we'll see.
The other part of this too is the Deebo disappointment after, the first 6-7 weeks. Yeah. He was awesome. And then lately, obviously with Marcus Mariota and just this declining team, it has not been good. And he's been dealing with some injuries on top of it. And then I'm optimistic about Tez Johnson the rest of the way. Like we saw, Chris Godwin standing next to Bucky Irving in these possible UFO-like practice footage, Bigfoot camera angles. But Tez might not be given that job back, and at the very least, he could be a downfield big play threat for this team. And you couldn't get more different body types between, Chris Godwin at 215 and Tez Johnson, who's at 155. But Tez has been a bit of a baller out there. So I even like picking up that asset the rest of the way for an explosive passing game.
I'm a big Tez Johnson guy, man. I was there at the Senior Bowl. I was taller than him, and I was just standing next to him, and I couldn't believe that this guy's
I'm gonna guess you weigh
player.
A little more than he does too for us. Just
I look just
guessing.
a little bit, I got little chubby cheeks here. You know what I mean? So no, for sure. But the dude is a baller, man. He was the best separator at the Senior Bowl, and it wasn't even close. So big fan of Tez Johnson. He's basically doing what Jalen McMillan did last year. Right? Like not getting a crazy target share, but all he's doing is scoring touchdowns. So him and Baker got the rapport going. Baker is just like elevating these dudes, man. You just love to see it. You really do. And Chris Godwin, who knows? Is he going to be earning a high target share when he's back? In that first game when he came back, like he had the same number of targets as Emeka Egbuka.
Drops.
But but who
Weak
knows
hands.
what is that going to look like, moving forward? So I agree, man. I think Tez Johnson could have some rest of season value.
All right, that does it. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate it. We'll be back one more time with it and run it back next week. Talk to y'all soon. See ya.